Good day, wonderful viewers. Welcome back to our channel, where we deliver the news that truly matters to every Nigerian. I am coming to you today with breaking developments that have sent shockwaves across the nation and beyond our borders. We are discussing two interconnected stories that affect Nigeria's security, unity, and international standing. The first is the life imprisonment sentence handed to Nnamdi Kanu just days ago, followed immediately by urgent appeals from lawmakers and international voices. The second is the United States Congress's powerful resolution calling for the release of prisoners detained on religious grounds in Nigeria. Stay with me through this critical update because understanding these stories is essential for every Nigerian, whether at home or abroad. Let me start with the development that has dominated headlines for the past few days. On Wednesday, November 20, 2025, Justice James Omotosho of the Federal High Court in Abuja sentenced Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, to life imprisonment on terrorism charges. The judge determined that prosecutors successfully proved their case on 7 counts beyond reasonable doubt, stating that Kanu's broadcasts and directives to the now-banned IPOB organization incited deadly attacks on security forces and citizens in the southeast. According to the court's findings, Kanu's actions, particularly his Radio Biafra broadcasts, encouraged violence as part of his campaign for an independent Biafran state. Justice Omotosho emphasized that while self-determination is a political right, any such movement not conducted according to Nigeria's constitution is illegal. The judge noted that from the prosecution's evidence, it was clear that Kanu carried out preparatory acts of terrorism and was determined to execute threats without consideration for the lives of his own people. Now, what makes this story particularly dramatic is what happened immediately after the verdict. Reports indicate that Kanu was ejected from the courtroom before the ruling after shouting angrily in objection to the proceedings. His legal team has maintained that his unlawful extradition from Kenya in 2021 fundamentally undermined any possibility of a fair trial. Under Nigerian law, Kanu has 90 days to appeal this conviction. But here is where the story takes an extraordinary turn. Within hours of the sentencing, the political response began building rapidly. By Monday, November 24, 2025, just 4 days after the verdict, 42 members of the Southeast Caucus of the House of Representatives met at the National Assembly and resolved to appeal directly to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for clemency. These lawmakers are urging the president to consider what they describe as a political and humanitarian intervention under Section 175 of the Constitution, which grants the president power to grant pardons. The lawmakers' appeal is remarkable for its frankness. In their communiqué, they acknowledge their total respect for the judiciary and the legal process that led to the conviction, but they argue that their responsibility as elected representatives requires them to speak clearly when a legal matter evolves into a broader national concern with serious humanitarian, economic, and security consequences. They believe that Kanu's continued imprisonment has intensified agitation in the southeast and that a presidential act of mercy at this time could de-escalate tensions, restore normalcy, and reduce the cycle of security operations and civil resistance. These lawmakers are not alone in their appeal. This follows an earlier letter from November 18, 2025, when 44 federal lawmakers from both northern and southern regions, operating under the platform called Concerned Federal Lawmakers for National Unity, had already written to President Tinubu requesting that he direct the Attorney General to discontinue Kanu's prosecution. These representatives from different political parties and geopolitical zones argued for a political solution rather than continued judicial confrontation. Now, think carefully about the broader context here. The Southeast has experienced significant tumult since Kanu's rearrest in 2021. Violent sit-at-home orders have crippled economic activities across the region. Markets remain closed on certain days, schools shut down, and businesses suffer enormous losses. Many believe that criminals and armed groups have exploited Kanu's detention to commit atrocities while falsely claiming to act in IPOB's name. Communities have been destabilized, with residents fleeing their ancestral homes due to kidnappings and violence. Prominent Nigerians have also weighed in powerfully. Human rights lawyer Dele Farotimi described Kanu's conviction as a Pyrrhic victory for the Nigerian state, arguing that President Tinubu would do well to free him now. Former presidential candidate Peter Obi urged the government to pursue dialogue and reconciliation warning that the current approach has created an unavoidable destruction at a time when citizens are overwhelmed by economic hardship and insecurity. Senator Nyanayabare stated that the conviction was not surprising and criticized what he called a double standard in the government's approach to justice, noting that other militant groups have received amnesty. The timing of all these appeals is crucial. They reflect a growing consensus among political leaders across party lines and regions that a political solution might be necessary to restore peace to the southeast and redirect security resources to other pressing challenges facing the nation. Now, let me connect this to our second major story, which links Nigeria to serious international concerns. On November 4, 2025, United States Congressman Riley Moore from West Virginia introduced a resolution in Congress that directly addresses religious persecution in Nigeria. This resolution condemns the ongoing persecution of Christians and calls for urgent action, including the repeal of blasphemy laws and the release of prisoners detained for their faith. This congressional resolution comes on the heels of the Trump administration's decision to designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern regarding religious freedom violations. This designation is significant because it opens the door for diplomatic and economic measures to hold perpetrators accountable. President Trump himself has made strong statements about Nigeria, and the administration has been vocal about what it describes as widespread targeting of Christians by militant groups. The resolution specifically identifies Boko Haram, Islamic State West Africa Province, and certain militant factions as responsible for targeting Christians, while also criticizing the Nigerian government for what it calls a failure to adequately protect Christian communities. Congressman Moore emphasized that President Trump had asked him and the House Appropriations Committee to lead congressional investigations and recommendations to combat persecution of Christians in Nigeria. The statistics cited in this resolution are sobering. According to estimates mentioned in the congressional discussions, more than 7,000 Christians have been killed for their faith in 2025 alone, averaging 35 deaths every day. Since Boko Haram's insurgency began in 2009, reports suggest that between 50,000 and 100,000 Christians have been killed. Additionally, more than 19,000 churches have been attacked or destroyed, and in Benue and Plateau states alone, over 9,500 individuals, mostly Christians, were killed between May 2023 and May 2025. The resolution calls on the United States government to pressure Nigeria to end impunity for attacks, proactively protect Christian communities and clergy, return internally displaced persons to their homelands, and critically, to repeal draconian blasphemy laws and release prisoners detained for practicing their religion. These blasphemy laws, which exist in 12 northern states and can carry the death penalty, have been the subject of international criticism for years. It is important to understand the broader context here. Nigeria is a diverse nation where Christians constitute approximately 45% of the population and Muslims about 53%, with the vast majority of both communities believing in peaceful coexistence. However, the violence has been multi-layered, involving not just religious tensions but also ethnic conflicts, disputes between farmers and herders over land and water resources, and criminal banditry that affects Nigerians of all faiths. Just last Friday, November 22, 2025, more than 300 students and teachers were kidnapped from St. Mary's Private Catholic School in Niger State, highlighting the ongoing security crisis. While 50 students managed to escape, over 250 remain in captivity. Pope Leo XIV made a heartfelt appeal for their release, expressing immense sadness about these kidnappings. So, dear viewers, let us connect these two stories and consider what they mean for Nigeria's future. Both stories fundamentally address questions of freedom, justice, and how Nigeria balances security concerns with human rights and national unity. The Nnamdi Kanu case presents President Tinubu with perhaps one of the most delicate decisions of his presidency. On one side, there is the court verdict based on legal proceedings. On the other side, there is growing political pressure from across party lines, arguing that a pardon could bring peace to the southeast, restore economic activities, expose criminals hiding behind IPOB's banner, and demonstrate presidential magnanimity. The question is whether the rule of law and political reconciliation can work together to achieve lasting peace. Regarding the American Resolution on Religious Freedom, Nigeria must carefully examine how its laws and security approaches affect citizens of all faiths. When the U.S. Congress passes resolutions about conditions in our country and designates Nigeria as a country of particular concern, it affects our nation's reputation globally. This can impact foreign investment, international partnerships, diplomatic relationships, and how Nigerians are perceived abroad. Here is my question to you, our engaged viewers. Should President Tinubu grant clemency to Nnamdi Kanu as lawmakers are requesting? Would such a decision bring the peace that advocates promise, or could it create other challenges? And regarding the international pressure on religious freedom, how should Nigeria respond to these concerns while maintaining its sovereignty and addressing the complex multi-layered security challenges affecting citizens of all faiths? These are not simple questions with easy answers. Nigeria's strength has always been in our diversity, but that diversity requires constant dialogue, mutual respect, and leaders willing to make difficult decisions for the greater good. Whether we are discussing the fate of one man whose case has become symbolic of regional grievances, or addressing the broader question of how we protect all citizens regardless of their faith, we need thoughtful conversations that prioritize